let's get to the fun part of chapter 4. We're going to talk about the biomes. We're going to talk about terrestrial and aquatic. So let's get that party started. Now, what dictates a biome? It's climate. It is the amount, it's the temperature in that region. It's going to be based a lot on the precipitation patterns. And really the biome itself, yes, there are animals and organisms that live there, but we really base a lot of the characteristics on the plants that grow there because they are the producers, and without them, then the consumers wouldn't have producers to eat, especially those first level consumers, okay? So let's keep on. Our first one is going to be the tundra, not the truck. Tundra is cold. Tundra is way north Arctic, way south Antarctic. It is in the polar areas. Soil is completely frozen. That is what we call that permafrost. Let's see here. Not trees. They're not going to have trees here. What tree-like structures you would have in plants would be more shrubbish. Not a ton of leaves, but would having to be able to deal with cold weather and winds, so they don't grow very tall. Very, very short summers, very short. And when I say summer, I mean warm months above freezing. I don't mean like what we consider our summer. Now, for each of these biomes, I'm going to include 2 climatograms. And what a climatogram does is it gives you a ton of information in a picture, in a graph. So I'm going to show you how to depict these, because by the end of this chapter, the expectation is for you to analyze the climatogram and identify what possible biome it's representing. In this one here, it is a tundra. So let's take a look. You've got bars. The bars always represent the precipitation. So just remember, bars, precip. You can measure it over here on the left. And then the line graph here is going to be your temperature and how it changes over the course of the year. Its measurement is going to be over here on the right-hand side. You will see slight variations in how these are presented. They may be color-coded with 2 line graphs. You'll see other ways that they are presented. I tried to put a couple of different ones in this presentation so you can see that, but if there's bars, it's precip. Now, let's move a little warmer, not much, to the taiga and the boreal forest. These are synonymous with one another. They're the same thing. And just kind of where you're from as to where it's called, what it is exactly called. In this region, you have thawed soil for some of the year, enough to allow more plant growth. The trees that exist here tend to be coniferous or evergreens. Very, very few deciduous trees live here. The boreal forest and the taiga really does exist mostly in the northern hemispheres, and in the northern part of the northern hemispheres between about 50 and 60 degrees north. So think about Russia, parts of Europe, North America, Canada, okay? It does get really, really cold in the winter. The winter is still very long. The growing season is not very long, and because of that, that's one of the reasons why the soils are not the best. So here you can see how the temperature here is really the major difference between the boreal forest and the tundra. Very little rain, not a lot. A lot of the water that they do get provided may come from melted snow and from whenever it warms up and all that, and from up in the higher altitudes. All right, let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about what we call temperate rainforest. So temperate means moderate. So in a temperate rainforest, we have lots of rain, but it's not super hot and tropical and gross. It's not super muggy. But what we have here is in a temperate rainforest, you have high precipitation, and you also have a lot of ocean currents that, as they blow in onto the land, help bring in this precipitation. And that's one of the reasons why it gets so rainy. It can be pretty foggy in these areas, but the temperatures are still pretty mild because of their locations. Still far away from the equator. We're talking about parts of like Northern California, Washington State, Oregon, that kind of area. And then if you're talking about Southern Hemisphere, coastline of Chile, New Zealand, those parts of the world. So here we have temperate rainforest. We do tend to get a lot of big trees growing in these areas. Long living trees as well. So as you can see in the climatogram over here on the right hand side, this is representing Vancouver in Canada. And you can see that, yeah, there's a lot more precipitation here than we had in those prior climatograms. It is very seasonal, meaning that it does go from cold to warm, back to cold again. So you have a wide range in temperatures throughout the year. So we're going to go from that rainforest. Now let's talk about seasonal forests. Now these are where our deciduous trees tend to be. These are the trees that, drop their leaves every fall, like what we have mostly here in Texas, the oak trees and those kinds of things. Other broadleaf trees that you might see here would be things like maples, nut trees, beech, aspens, those kinds of trees. These areas do get a lot of rain, and they can be found all over the world, kind of moderate latitudes, and you do get, again, quite a difference in temperature between the cold seasons and the warmer seasons. So because of that, you have that warmer area in that warmer time of year. It does allow for more stuff to break down and decompose into higher quality soil. Here is a picture of what you might think of whenever you see a temperate seasonal forest. A lot of Europe is this, especially eastern United States as well. Lots of rain, pretty much. There's different seasons, like summer, you tend to get a little bit more, but it's pretty constant throughout the year. And again, as we previously mentioned, quite a range in temperatures. Woodland shrubland. All right, so when you think of California wildfires, this is what I want you to think of. This is where this is prevalent in parts of California, Australia, Africa, and the whole area around the Mediterranean. You get really hot, dry summers. The winters are really mild, sometimes more rainy than others, depending on where you are. You don't really get super hard freezes, and so because of that, you do have extended, long growing seasons, and that's why California is one of the best places to grow a lot of produce for the rest of our country, is because of that. But again, as we said, it's the wildfires. Those wildfires, whenever there's a drought or it dries out at all, you have changes in seasons, then it's a thing. It's a big issue. Look at the difference here as we saw from the last climatogram. So as you can see, the temperature, not a lot of fluctuation. Okay, in the rain, we definitely have a definite dry area here, dry period of time in the summers. Okay, temperate grassland. This can also be called a cold desert, especially in places in Central Asia. Temperate grasslands are Oklahoma, Kansas, the Midwestern states. We don't have a lot of rain in these areas, but it is a temperate biome in that you do have good fluctuations in temperature, depending on the growing season or to the cold season. See, the winters can be very harsh. A lot of times there's not a lot of trees for protection and coverage, again, because it's very windy, and because of all that wind, the winters can be very harsh. Summers, extremely dry and hot. These tend to be in high pressure areas in the summer, so therefore you don't get a lot of cloud cover, and therefore you don't get a lot of that cooling because of clouds in the summer, and yeah, it's pretty much a scorcher. Northern parts of Texas are also fall within this. Anything kind of north of the hill country in Texas, central Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth. We do have trees, but they're not going to be as numerous nor as tall because of rain, lack of rain, and wind, and things like that. Mostly grasses, and wildflowers. Here's an example of a couple of a climatogram. So the one here on the left, I like these. They're more relevant to what you're going to see on the actual AP test. Large fluctuations in temperature, and you go through, periods where you get more rain versus less. The rainier season tends to be spring, and so just think April showers bring May wildflowers. Okay, now let's get hot and humid. Tropical rainforest. That's right. I can hear the frogs now in the Amazon. In these regions, it gets hot. And this is more along the lines around the equator. There's not a lot of seasons. If anything, they have a dry and a wet season. Central South America, Africa, parts of Asia, that all fall along the equator. This is where you're going to see these areas. It rains a lot, sometimes daily. If in the rainy season, it would rain a lot of times more than once a day. And because of this, everything stays pretty humid and damp and wet, but it does allow for a huge biodiversity of animals and plants and fungi and all sorts of stuff. Because that moisture's there, there's a lot of rollover in that decomposition, really rich soils, and this is where the majority of Earth's terrestrial species live, are in these tropical rainforests. Okay, so here you can see it stays really, really warm, and you're thinking, but what about the rain? Well, the one here on the left is looking at the Philippines, where you see the star. The one here on the right is more of the Amazonian, and you can see how it kind of flips, but there is still a huge amount of rain throughout the year, and therefore, because of that, there's a lot of productivity. All right, tropical seasonal forests, otherwise known as savannas. You probably use the word savanna more frequently. They are warm. They tend to be warm. And again, they tend to have more of the wet and dry season, not a 4-season type climate that we have here. This is prevalent in areas of Central America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and again, that's probably where you're kind of focusing your thoughts on this would be, and parts of Australia as well. Soil tends to be fairly fertile because, again, you have fairly good decomposition rates, and you have, because of the wet season, and it's, fairly warm most of the year. Depending on what plants you have there, then that can also re-nutrify the soil as well. Lots of grasses, and you have some deciduous trees, but again, they're not going to be super huge, or you're not going to have like huge forests of them. All right, so here you can see there's big differences between what times of the year experience rainfall and not. But again, with the temperature, you're not going to see a huge change. It's always goes from warm to cooler to warm. So it's not, you don't have like a big freeze you have to be concerned about.